Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the September Jamf Breakfast Club. This is transforming your classroom, both with Apple technology, both in and out of the classroom. If you haven't seen Jamf Breakfast Club before, it's a 30-minute to 45-minute chat where we bring on guests, and it's ourselves at Jamf with fellow guests, and we've got some great guests for you this morning. If you've got any questions, please put them in the comments. We'll look through them throughout the session, but also come to them at the end. So I want to hand over to and welcome first and foremost Mathew Pullen. Matt has joined us very recently. Welcome to Jamf, Matt. We've worked closely together for a while, but Matt, please introduce yourself.
Thanks a lot, Aaron. Yep, so I'm Mathew Pullen. I am the product marketing manager here at Jamf, taking over from Aaron, and it's a real pleasure to be here today. I've been on Jamf Breakfast Club before as a guest, first time being here as a host, which is fab. And I've got the great pleasure today to introduce our two fantastic guests with us, Anastasia from Explain Everything and Neil from TrilbyTV. Anastasia, I'll throw it over to you first. Good morning, and do you want to tell us a little bit about you and perhaps a little bit of an elevator pitch around Explain Everything?
Sure thing. So yeah, I'm Anastasia Procner, and I am the online instruction specialist at Explain Everything. I've been here for, well, going on 3 years now, and I like to think that I know a thing or two about the product, although I have to say it is pretty vast. So about that elevator pitch. What is Explain Everything? So in case anyone here doesn't know, Explain Everything is a recordable digital whiteboard that works in any teaching scenario. We basically have 3 main use cases. The original one is recording, which is why I mentioned it's a recordable digital whiteboard, but also we do collaboration. So that's like synchronous or asynchronous, and also live presentation. So all of these 3 use cases can be used separately or combined, which is also pretty cool. So you can kind of really tailor the experience to what you need. And yeah, I think that the main focus here, the main thing I'd like to turn everyone's attention to and make sure everyone knows is that Explain Everything makes it incredibly easy for everyone to create. So I'm not just talking about the teachers, but also the students. We have some fantastic examples of teachers who create the learning materials with their students in real time in the classroom, using all sorts of media formats and just making the students a part of the lesson. Everyone can contribute, and yeah, we're talking about things as simple as, I don't know, slides, or as advanced as 3D objects. You can pretty much put anything on the canvas, a live browser. I could go on for a while, but yeah, that's what Explain Everything is. And we also like to think that, you know, all of these skills are going to be useful to students in the future as well, regardless of which professions they get into. So Explain Everything is pretty cool and relevant on a whole bunch of different levels. And yeah, I hope to get into that a little bit more later on. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
No, that's great. Great you're here. And Neil, over to you.
Hello, I'm Neil Emery. I'm a director of TrilbyTV. I guess in the Apple world, I've had plenty of Apple acronyms in the past. Apple Distinguished Educator, Apple Sales Trainer, Apple Education Mentor, all of those ones that we've been through, Matt and Aaron, in the past. So quite a heavy Apple background myself. TrilbyTV, we're a digital signage platform made for education. Made's an important word for us. We've taken 30 years of education experience and built a platform that is absolutely made for education. That's our passion, day in, day out. Was really developed from our time as Apple education trainers back in the day of iPad release, that technology revolution, as I still see it as one of the biggest ones, if not the biggest one we've seen, certainly in my lifetime. We were delivering training in schools that had bought into iPad all over the country. And we would sit in school receptions waiting for someone like, you know, yourself back in the day, Matt, to come and grab us for a training session. And we would look at a digital signage screen that was either turned off or it was playing content we felt had very little impact on us as a viewer. The iPad would create very rich content with apps like Explain Everything, one of our go-to apps early in the day of using iPad. But there was no nice way to share and showcase that work. And of course, we would do a couple at the end of a lesson, but we wanted to share and showcase everybody's work. And that's really how TrilbyTV was born. It's super simple to use. We learned from those early apps like Showbie and Explain Everything, again, that if you make the app easy to use, then people will enjoy that experience and go again with it. So it's super easy to use, works across any platform. So in the Apple world, we have player apps for iOS, tvOS, and macOS, and it's cloud-based. So you can update your screens with your sharing and showcasing instantly. So yeah, that's TrilbyTV.
That's awesome.
Awesome. That's great. Well, the question everyone wants to know, Neil, though, what year was you of ADE? Was it the?
Well, it was just a handshake back then. I'm not sure I'm allowed to say that. Julian Coultas worked for Apple back then, and I think it was 2004. I was an ADE, so about 18 years ago. So
wow,
yes, I think we had color television. I think.
That's great to hear. I'm super excited about these stories. Both of you are on our solution marketplace as well. So marketplace.jamf.com. There's integrations there. We'll be sharing some links and links to each TrilbyTV and Explain Everything websites throughout in the comments section, and some other links to help out as well. So thank you both very much for joining us. Let's jump in. And Anastasia, I want to turn it over to you first and just say, how have you seen digital whiteboards have an impact on the learning experience? And that's across the world as well, really, because I know you've worked with many, many schools.
Yeah, you're right. I think I'd like to get into a few of the schools later on, and it turns out that there's this one school that me and Neil can talk a little bit about. But yeah, I mean, we've worked with schools all over the world, but it's really been interesting how the feedback that we get from teachers is very often very, very similar. And I think that kind of tells us that we're on the right track. So I wanted to talk a little bit, maybe first off, about screen mirroring. So this might seem like something that's like super, easy and obvious, but it isn't. I think until very recently, teachers were pretty much, chained, so to speak, to the board, or, the whiteboard, the blackboard, whatever it was. They were at the front of the classroom. They had to be there. And now just, Explain Everything makes it, so easy to basically just mirror your screen. You can, explain everything on iPad. You can teach wherever you want in the classroom. Of course, this works on other devices as well, but I'm not going to lie, it is the easiest, right? On iPad, you can be anywhere in the classroom, and you can be, as I mentioned before, having your students take an active part in the lesson. We have gotten videos from classrooms of, our teachers or different ADs, for example, taking pictures of their students, putting them right up there on the board in real time, the students having a great time. So I would say that one of the things we hear the most often is that it just lets the teacher become a part of the lesson, a part of the classroom. It lets all the students become part of the lesson more than they were before. And it just makes the experience of learning so much more engaging, just because it's live, it's happening right here, right now. Fractions are maybe not the most, exciting material for students to be learning, but suddenly when they're all putting their faces on the board and talking about who ate how much of the pizza or who drank how much of the Pepsi, suddenly everybody is like super excited about, about fractions. So I hope that illustrates my point more or less. Yeah, should I keep going? Because I could go on for, as I said, for a while.
Keep going. I love the fact that you started with mirroring, because so many schools are like looking at this journey and think, we've just got iPads, where do we start? And when I first went into schools, and it was like there was a visualizer like attached to a PC at the front of the room, and people were trying to put books underneath it, and you suddenly show just turning on the camera on an iPad and then just using that as like a mobile visualizer and airplaying it to the board. That completely blows people's minds. But what we're going into with now an interactive whiteboard that's in the hands of all the students, that's the next level. So yeah, please dive into all the feature sets that you've got and how it transforms the learning experience for students and teachers.
So like I said, I mean, there's so much, so many different media formats, so much rich media that you can add to your whiteboard in real time, to your whiteboard canvas. Creating all new things, editing materials and Explain Everything is also incredibly easy. So you can just add a piece of something, drag and drop, etc. We've seen some really, really cool stuff, and I do invite anyone who's here to check out our blog later on and our success stories. I know that we're going to be putting some links up here, so there are some things that you have to actually see for yourselves to see how much fun they are and how engaged the students got in it while they were doing it. Another thing, of course, that I have to bring up, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is that Explain Everything was originally a recordable digital whiteboard. So that's something that it turns out that students absolutely love. I think that every student, or maybe not every student, but a lot of kids these days kind of dream about becoming content creators, and having this device in their hands that allows them to just easily create their own content from scratch using any media that they want has really gotten, not only just gotten students involved and engaged and got them having fun, but it's also, I think, given a lot of freedom to students who maybe have different abilities, or who don't learn the way that, that we were supposed to learn when we were all going to school, right? Where you just kind of read a book and then, unfortunately, in a lot of cases, memorize what's written down there. Some students aren't that good at that kind of learning, and that's fine. I think that technology gives them the freedom to learn the way that they like and express their knowledge the way they like. So we've heard some incredibly heartwarming stories, even from teachers talking about how they had students with stutters, or students with, I don't know, really bad eyesight, for a lack of better words. And these are students who just take their device, they go to a place where they feel safe, they have time, they create this whole, incredible video on a subject, and they come back to their teacher and they can express their knowledge in a way that maybe wouldn't be available to them if they had to stand in front of the class and recite something the way that, as I said, probably all of us had to do when we were in school. So the explainer videos are also fun to watch, and just, like I said, downright heartwarming sometimes when you see how creative these kids can get and how happy they are to be able to express themselves in a way that's not just regurgitating memorized text. And I'm sorry, I'm a teacher myself and a psychologist, so I get kind of emotional about this. But so that's the second one, and that's the second use case. And then there's the collaborative feature. So I think I mentioned that before, right? Like, students working together, they're also learning all sorts of skills. They're going to be useful to them in the future: teamwork skills, remote work, remote teamwork, asynchronous, right? So, I mean, look at us right now, like, we're in different countries and different parts of the world, and this is what the future is going to be for these kids. So the sooner they learn to work this way and, discipline themselves and take ownership of what it is that they're doing, of their project, I mean, the better for them, So it's, I think, combining the practical with something that's just fun for them. So yeah,
I think that's great, and I love hearing about, like, the students being the creators. And you said it yourself that there's a real passion for children to kind of get their stuff out there. So I guess, Neil, is a great time to bring you in. Like, we've got this fantastic content being created on devices by children. Doesn't just have to stay on iPads, though, right? It doesn't have to just stay on that small screen.
No, it doesn't. I just want to switch back to Anastasia's. The creativity part is really important. Remember when I was learning, I just didn't get that traditional way of learning, and hence I did very badly in my GCEs, last year of GCEs. Well, I'm old. But as soon as I got into a little bit later in my life, I ended up realizing that creative path was absolutely the path I wanted to go down. Although, looking at my results, I did well in art and I did well in design and technology. So something was kind of telling me back then that was the path. And I went on to run a recording studio for a number of years, because creativity, but it was never back then something that was promoted. I remember one example, Blenheim High School, they were one-to-one iPad, and we did lots of training there, including vision and plan. And we were doing a session where we were getting the children on their iPads to come up with an advert using various apps, Explain Everything being one of them, Pick Collage, all these little apps, piece together an advert. And one of the young pupils that day, I remember he came in, sat on his own, and we weren't sure of the situation, but everybody else was sat with friends. He was on his own, and he made a really cool advert for Subaru. He loves Subaru cars. And we had the ability that day to put TrilbyTV on the screen in reception, which we did. And he obviously went and saw his advert playing on the screen in reception. And he came back to us during that break time and said, "I've just seen my work playing." And he said to us, "That's probably one of the proudest days I've had at this school." And that was the mechanism was simple, right? We were just taking what he created on the iPad and shared it instantly to that screen in reception. And that's your question, Matt. That sharing and showcasing piece is really important. Back in the day, AirPlay's great, absolutely. But usually you got to the end, you were so cramming in a training session, you got to the end and you'd show 2 or 3 and everybody had that kind of appetite to see theirs, but you'd have to say, sorry, no, we've got to stop it there. And we're getting all of this content on these iPads, but it's difficult for us to get that content off. You know, it's hidden almost. It's a bit like taking photos on your phone. We take so many and then we hardly ever look at them, right? You know, the excitement is taking the picture, but what about the excitement of actually sharing and showcasing that content? And that's where TrilbyTV came in. That was our aspiration back in the day. We wanted to evidence that content, that journey. If you're on a one-to-one iPad journey, it was really important to evidence the success of that journey. Well, for us, if you were sharing all the content on the iPads, then that was a great way to evidence the success of that iPad journey, you know. So yes, it was always about taking that content off, Matt. And TrilbyTV, we wanted to create a mechanism that was super simple to do that, which TrilbyTV is. And being honest, we very much built it for the Apple space to begin with. That's why we built TrilbyTV. It was always a big part of our vision and plan sessions we did with schools. Again, how do you take all that content? How do you share and showcase it around the school? How do you make sure that you're making the maximum opportunity of all the hardware that you've purchased, whether that be an iPad, Mac, Apple TV, etc. So yeah, hugely important to get it off the device and share and showcase it and make the pupils proud of what they're doing.
So, I mean, I love hearing that, and that story about the pride of an individual, of they've done something and it's gone somewhere. I think that's huge. And we know with iPads, like we're mobile with iPads, right? We can learn anywhere. We don't just have to learn in the classroom space. How do you see the products that you have supporting iPad to allow that learning to take place anywhere? Doesn't have to be confined to that classroom environment. Anastasia, I'll chuck that to you first.
Sure. But before I answer, I just kind of wanted to come back to something that Neil said a moment ago. It's just amazing, I think, like the direction that learning is going in, and it's just a beautiful thing to behold, like how diametrically opposed it is now to what it used to be in the past. Like I do our little podcast here at Explain Everything, and I have teachers come on, and there are so many teachers I've talked to who are like wonderful, passionate educators. And one of the things that made them that way is that when they were in school, they also, as Neil mentioned, weren't great at like the traditional, memorize a page of text kind of learning. And they got told by their teachers that, I mean, in some cases, even that they weren't that bright, or that this just isn't for you. Maybe you should do something else. And, that luckily kind of awoke in them this passion for doing things differently. But it's just so diametrically opposed to what, Neil was just talking about now, right? Now you have this kid who maybe isn't great at a certain type of learning, but he's really creative in other ways. And you can take his work and you can put it up there. And just what it does for him, for his development, for his self-esteem. I mean, these are things that are going to, they're going to influence perhaps his career, perhaps his entire life. There are so many people who heard in high school, I don't know, you're not good at math. And now they're 40 and they still hate math. It's just, I think sometimes teachers can underestimate how much of an impact they actually are having on these kids. And it can be in a good way or in a bad way. So yeah, I just really had to come back to that because we've heard so many stories like that. But getting back to your question as well, Matt. So when it comes to the different ways that, I'm sorry, could you just repeat that question real quick? Because I got so into what I was saying.
No, and it's great to sort of jump on those things. And it's, I think you're absolutely right to sort of pick up on what Neil was saying about the impact on the individual learner. And I guess that's kind of where my question was going. Like, we've definitely learned from a pandemic that learning doesn't have to take place in a classroom. So I guess the question was really around, how do your applications support that new learning environment, I guess, where we might not all be sat at desks and facing the front and listening to the teacher. What does Explain Everything, what does TrilbyTV offer the space now as we're kind of creating this new approach to education?
I think maybe here I'd like to kind of focus a little bit on like the hybrid model, because, as you said, like we're kind of back, but we're not entirely back. I don't know if that makes any sense, but I think you know what I'm trying to say. So with Explain Everything, and as I mentioned, those 3 main use cases that we have that kind of overlap, this allows a teacher to be able to create their own materials from scratch while in the classroom, together with their students who can be contributing to this canvas and adding their own stuff, their own ideas, answers, content in real time, and at the same time be broadcasting the screen as well to students who might be sitting at home because, I don't know, their immune system is compromised, or they just weren't feeling well that day, or whatever the case may be. They can be sitting at home and participating in real time, contributing to this board. And of course, after this remote experiment, this unprecedented remote experiment that we're kind of 2.5 years into at this point, we all know that, of course, face-to-face is probably always going to be, the best experience. But there are so many situations in which that's just not possible or not practical. And I think that the way that Explain Everything can layer these different scenarios and just that flexibility really allows you to keep people feeling like they're still part of something, keep them feel like they're in the loop, that their opinion matters, that they're not just passively just watching, right, what's happening, but they can be part of it, as we like to say here, no matter the distance. So I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, it really does. And Neil, over to you. I mean, anything to add and anything to sort of contribute towards that from Trilby's point of view?
Well, I think from a digital signage perspective, in the past in schools, it was very information focused. If you walked into a reception area, you'd get your ticker tape and your clock and your logo and probably BBC News inspiring us all, right, with negative opinions, because that's what news tends to be. So we really wanted to take signage to a different thought process. I mean, anywhere is a learning space, right? The stairwell doesn't have to be the stairwell. The dinner hall doesn't just have to be the dinner hall. If we're clever about thinking about spaces, we can stimulate pupils' learning at any level. So it really is for us about thinking where screens are, who the viewers are, the time that a viewer has in that location. First and foremost, you've got to get these fundamentals right with signage before you can then move on. But it's also taking it away from that information focus, which is important at times, absolutely. But, we've seen so many examples of, where students' sort of learning is being activated before the lesson. So, we'll post a question or we'll post an image, we'll get the students thinking before that lesson using signage before they actually go into it. They have their lesson, whatever they're focused on. But again, after that lesson, again, we can go into deeper learning. Again, we can post a question. We can post some further thinking. We can post that image that gets them thinking about what they've just done. And beyond that, Matt, it's about sharing and showcasing what they did in the lesson. It's reinforcing what they did. And I think that's a really big opportunity outside, moving away from traditional signage. But I think inside as well, we've got Apple TVs, we've got interactive classroom boards that are being used for a lesson. But as we all know, with the exciting abilities of Jamf and timing single app mode in, we could be reinforcing learning before the lesson starts, during lunch times, etc., etc. So the possibilities are pretty endless. Always needs a bit of a plan and a bit of a thinking and a bit of ownership. All those stuffs that we did in Vision and Plan all those years ago, you need that plan that's going to make things happen. Otherwise, that's where it all tends to fall down. But yeah, learning spaces, lots of opportunity.
I love that, Neil, especially when I think about what the tools that we've got with Explain Everything. Like, we've got an interactive whiteboard in the front of a traditional classroom that are so costly, and sometimes they don't even get used in the right way. They're often just used to put up some sort of presentation. What we can now do is, we've got the opportunity to flip that. We can put a screen at the front, which is very sort of low cost. You've got an interactive whiteboard in the hands of every learner, and that teacher has now got their iPad or their device with a stylus or Apple Pencil that can move around the classroom. And you layer in that digital signage as well on an Apple TV managed by Jamf, like what you said before, having that ability to put different modes up at different times of the day. You've now got a low power consumption device at the front of the classroom, which schools will start to think about, especially in terms of cost saving. And then the ability to take that large interactive whiteboard, put it into the hands of students, because how many of those were used when the classroom was shut? None. But now you've then got the ability, if a child had a device and that went home, you can still do those things outside the classroom. So I love how that this all comes together, and this is exactly why we talk about better together with Jamf and TrilbyTV and Explain Everything, because it's not just about the teaching and learning impacts, but it's the whole learning environment, the IT setup and infrastructure, the way we can manage these devices and these time areas and the learning spaces. For me, it's fantastic to have these conversations and let everyone know what is possible with the solutions that we've got here.
Yeah. And just quickly, if you think from a trust level as well, or group of schools level, district level, this can be done centrally. You know, if we've got thousands of Apple TVs, which some installations have, and we want to utilize them more, then centrally we can time content in that's trust focused or district focused. So again, that we're getting the message of the trust across. You know, we're inspiring those learners. That, as Anastasia said, I love the idea of like inspiring students for their further careers. We have some great examples of schools that put up alumni slides or careers advice, you know, so that students are picking that up early. You know, what do you want to be when you grow up? It's possible. If you want to be it, it's possible. So why aren't we using signage and classroom screens to inspire that more? So it's a great idea.
Yeah, I also think, just to kind of just round off this whole little part here, I just think that maybe in the past, teachers perhaps kind of underestimated how proud students would actually be to showcase their work. And there is no, at least not from my perspective, when I was in elementary school, middle school, or high school, there is really no pride in memorizing something. But if you can create something and then show people, like another example that we got from a teacher who was really, really, determined to do PE even during the lockdown. So of course the kids couldn't come into the gym, right? So everybody was at home. And basically what he had his students do, well, there were two different versions of this really. One of them was yoga. So the students who wanted to do it did like yoga poses, and then they would create their little explainer videos with a picture of themselves doing the pose, and then kind of like narrating what they were doing and what they could be doing better, for example. So they were also engaging in this kind of reflexive thinking. So they were not only exercising, right, but they were also combining all of these different digital literacy skills. And another one that he said that his students really got into was because he told them, you know what the pro athletes do? The pro athletes, they actually, like take pictures of their, of their poses, like stills from the recordings, and they analyze what they've been doing. And so you had all of these kids, probably mostly little boys, analyzing their football, their football performance. And they just got so into it, and they were like, everyone wanted to show what they did. They were getting together and comparing their, it was just, like I said, I think that in the more instructivist, or perhaps just old-fashioned, for a lack of better words, teaching style, I think teachers underestimated how excited these students could be. Students don't need to be forced to learn. They just need to be given a reason. And I think that this motivation couldn't possibly be better than being able to showcase their work and, really, really get into it, get into the topics. So, yeah.
There's a great quote from Rushton Hurley, which I'm sure you've all seen before, and I'll butcher it if I try and say it word for word, but roughly goes, if their children are doing work for their teacher or their parents, they do enough. If they do it for a wider audience, they do their best. And I've probably butchered that quote completely, but look it up, and he says it's so much better than me. But that whole idea of showcasing work is really, really powerful and really important to students. And I think that's something that we've probably lost sight of in the past as teachers, and we're now really starting to explore it as students are creating some fantastic content. So
yeah. And digital signage idea of the day for people out there: a yoga pose for their screens every day, made by the students. Nice one, Anastasia.
I have to say, seeing that little girl do that plank, I was like, wow, I need to step up my game. It was inspiring to me, and she was like 8.
That's amazing. And that's like the body coaching in making there. That's an entrepreneur being able to put that out to the world. That could even be a business or a future for her of going into that industry of being a yoga teacher and doing that online. So it's all things that we're doing in the real world now as well. Neil, when I think about how these solutions come together, and I know we've had a recent Jamf Breakfast Club with RGS Worcester. You've got a great case study with them that you've done recently. We've got a joint case study with Jamf and Explain Everything. Can you both tell us a little bit about, start with you, Neil, about how RGS Worcester have used all of these tools and how it's transformed their learning experience and their environments?
They call it the democratization of digital signage. That's a great word. Yeah, they had they had a number of digital signage screens that weren't being effectively managed or used. What they did was take that kind of role from IT, which historically signage has been an IT kind of management role, which is interesting because signage is a marketing tool. So IT, although the best people to set it up and look after it, they're not the best people to manage it. So what RGS Worcester was, they took it away from IT and they made it competitive. They got the screens that they had up and running with work that was showcasing what the students were doing, a lot of coding club, just really evidence in that one-to-one iPad project that they're on to show all the great stuff that they're making. And then the door started knocking and department heads would say, oh, that screen outside science, can I have one for geography? Can I have one for history? And of course, that drove that appetite for other departments to have their own screens outside their curriculum areas to share and showcase what they were doing, which kind of makes perfect sense, really. You know, if you've got science, you know, I remember back in the day, we were doing like on iPad, I'd be in science with a science teacher and they'd show the students this terrible YouTube video of the experiment they were about to do. It was the most awful YouTube video. And they've got cameras and explain everything. And you're going, why don't you get the students to make a really nice version of the experiment you're about to do and then show that? It was like that connection piece was often missed, you know. So and again, with RGS Worcester, they put a plan together, which is really important. You know, they gave guidance to the teachers and those users out there. They drove it with the students. So they have their digital leaders, of course, who are involved with that creation and the management piece as well. So they just opened it up. That's what they did. Give ownership and the opportunity for anyone to have a screen and share and celebrate what they were doing.
Yeah, talking about just science experiments real quick, we actually have a few teachers that we also featured on our blog who took advantage of the fact that the students couldn't come into school for a while, and they just went full mad scientist in those classrooms. They put on their, you know, they got all their test tubes and everything, and they recorded their own videos for their students. And they were also telling us about just the increase in engagement and also just better grades, even just to use that metric for a second. But it's really different when you send somebody a link to some random YouTube video, and it's just completely different when you see your teacher in their little lab coat in your classroom doing something for you. And I don't think I can name anybody by name here, so I'm not going to, but if you're out there, you know I'm talking about you. We had this one teacher who did this entire video because he was so bored that he basically did this entire video using Explain Everything in his classroom, where he was basically tossing gummy bears into like an acid volcano, you know, just I guess for fun because he was bored, but his students absolutely loved it. And it just allowed them to also maintain this feeling of togetherness despite the fact that they were so far away. And now add to that the fact that students can make their own videos like that if we wanted to, well, hopefully without the acid. But yeah, I mean, it really allows everyone to create, everyone to become part of this learning process, and it's just so much more personal. So yeah, just wanted to bring that up real quick because it was so cute.
No, and that's great. And I think, I mean, you've both kind of spoke to this next question anyway, but I think maybe if we just kind of wrap up these final thoughts around what impact is this having on students' learning, but also I think, Anastasia, to your point, the impact may be on the teacher experience as well, because we know that there's an issue worldwide around teacher recruitment, but you just kind of mentioned something then I think is really, really powerful around teachers loving the job again, right? Teachers getting really excited. Neil, you mentioned about like we could grab a YouTube video, we could make it ourselves. What difference is that making?
Well, I mean, I've mentioned the idea of students memorizing pages of text 2 or 3 times already. It's something that I feel very strongly about. But it's not just the students who don't like it; it's the teachers too. Like a lot of the times, you know, the books that they work with, they feel like the materials are perhaps incomplete, or perhaps they know from experience that explaining a topic this way doesn't really get through to most students, or whatever. And having a tool like Explain Everything means that they can create their own materials from scratch. Sometimes they even get on like one-to-one collaborative sessions with their students if it's just one student having a problem, and Explain Everything makes that super easy. But if they want to, they can create their own tailored materials for entire groups of students. And we have lots of teachers who do science experiments, who do their own little videos, even just filming themselves talking about a topic while bringing up something onto the canvas and narrating it their way, in a way that they see that the students will understand better. And I think that that's one thing that I would really like people to also, I guess, maybe take away from this, is that Explain Everything makes creating your own materials super, super easy. And I think the teachers love this as much as the students do. And we can see that from the conversations that we've had with a lot of people. So.
Yeah, I think it's pride, students being proud about seeing what they're making, but then having it showcased to the larger audience. That's, you see their faces. RGS Worcester, again, a good example. You speak to the students there and they will tell you that when they see their work around the school on the screens, that it makes them very proud. I do wonder, though, if there's still a nervousness with teachers and ownership to the students to make content. I do wonder if that's still in place. I have lots of schools who we come across who might be struggling to make content, and you're like, you've got 1,000 students here that could help make this content. And actually, if you ask them, it's a good question to say to them, what would you like to see on the screens, rather than just pushing content at them without asking them what they would like to see on the screens. So I do wonder if there is still some of that nervousness out there. But for us, again, it was always about sharing and showcasing student work to make them proud about what they're doing.
Yeah, I agree. There's a question that's come in. Paul, hello, Paul. I think we all know Paul. A great comment, Paul, about what you said about interactive whiteboards earlier. About it's the fact that the teacher is 99% of the time using that interactive whiteboard, and they perhaps don't know how to use it, which comes into that training and that planning, which we've spoken about on a number of times about here. The next question that's come in again from Paul is, Trilby TV and Explain Everything are both superb, well-established digital technologies. What needs to happen next for their potential to be truly exploited by teachers and pupils alike for transformative learning? Neil, do you want to kick off and see what the next steps are?
Oh, well, we're still quite young, so we're still in our journey. We're not as old. Well, I don't mean old, but we're not as well established as Explain Everything. So we're still on our journey of maturing. But it's not just the product for us, it's maturing that message of taking away traditional signage as it was, and actually getting, schools and colleges to think about, not just the information, but again, the alumni slides. I love Shirelands. They do Shirelands Collegiate Academies Trust. They're in the West Midlands, places like Smethwick. And they're, challenging places at times where students might not feel proud about where they live. But they did a whole piece on focusing on the communities across all of their schools, and they focused on different areas and picked up the history of those areas, because there's so much soul in those areas. Smethwick's an Anglo-Saxon word. I never knew that. So they, on one of their slides, they were explaining, different areas of the West Midlands and making students learn a bit more about those areas. So again, for us, it's about taking signage to this level of understanding that it's not just poking information. It's actually inspiring teachers and students, in whatever those messages are, to feel proud about where they go to school and about what they do each day. So I think we need to get over that first. The technology's in place, right? Again, with a touch of a button, I can send a message to any school in the country right now. That's what Trilby TV does. At the touch of a button, that Explain Everything can make the most exciting video to explain what we're doing in the lesson today. So I think the tech's there. It's just that maturing of the understanding of what's possible is what I would say.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with Neil. The tech is already here, but I think that the onus is kind of on us as the people who create the tech to show how valuable this really can be. Getting back to RGS just for 1 second as well. We talked to them. We talked about, pain points. We talked about, of course, deployment pain points. We talked about TCO, so, total cost of ownership. We talked about reflective thinking. These are all things that, they know, but I think that a lot of schools don't. And a lot of times if you're like a school tech administrator, and you have, there's 5 million apps for education out there. We really need to, I think these partnerships are very important, that we work together to show that there is real value to this, and not just, another app that a teacher is going to spend some time learning to use and is really not going to do anything. So as I said, I feel like the onus is on us, and I feel like we're really doing our best, especially as of the last 2 years or so, to kind of come together and show teachers, look, if you have this, this, and this, you don't need 5 million apps. You can have 3 or 4, and they can really cover all of the needs that you would have in the classroom, remotely, or anywhere in between. So yeah, the tech is here. We just need to get the word out.
Perfect. We're fast approaching our time. I know we've got people be like, so how do I get TrilbyTV and explain everything? What's the pricing? We'll drop the price links to each of your websites in the comments now. And if anyone's got any further questions, please reach out to us. We'll put our contact details out there. We'll put your contact details out there. All 3 of us can come into a conversation. When I say 3 of us, there's 4 of us on the screen, but I mean the 3 companies coming together to talk about this. So thank you very much. If you've got anything, Matt's going to take us out, but I just wanted to say thank you on behalf of everyone here for having this great conversation. Matt, over to you.
Yeah, just thanks so much for the conversation. Thanks everyone for joining in today. I think it's been a really rich conversation, and it's been great, I suppose, for my first one on this side of the panel. To be joined by 2 fantastic advocates for transformative learning and teaching. I think that's a really powerful thing. So just leaves me to say thank you both. To everybody out there watching, look out for our next event, which is on the 5th to 6th of October, our back to school event. The link will be in the chat space. You'll find out a lot more information about that. Jamf Breakfast Club will be back in November. Watch out for all of the details around that coming soon. And the final thing, your feedback is always really, really important to us. So there is a short survey, just a few questions. We'll put that into the chat box. If you could just give us any responses, that's always going to be helpful. So from me to you, thank you very much for joining in. Thank you, Aaron, for having me on with you this morning to guide me through the new role. But it's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you for having us. This has been great.
Yeah, well done, Matt. You did well.
Great start, Matt. It's all yours now.
You can stay.
Thank you very much, everyone.